In this example, we are going to talk about protected routes. And so this is a really valuable technique when you want to control access to a portion of your application. So for instance, imagine you had an admin section that you wanted to prevent somebody from going to unless they had been properly authenticated. And so this is where we implement protected routes. And so we think of this as a guarded route, a protected route, and we have the ability to insert just a little bit of logic in the form of a route guard to say yes or no. And so within our code, I am going to add in another path, and we're going to just call this one guarded, or rather, let's call it protected. So this is a protected route, and we're going to give it a component of protected component. And now what we're going to do is we are going to add in an additional property, which is can activate. And so this is pretty simple. It's can it activate true or false. And so from here, we are going to add in an auth guard. And so I'll show you what this looks like in a moment. But the point of this is this auth guard is going to do really one of two things. It's going to return true or false. There's also a second option, or a second and a half option, that I'm going to illustrate inside of this particular demonstration. Let me fix that typo there, and we are ready to go. So I'm going to take off the auth guard first. I'm going to save it. We'll go into our code, and I just want to show you what this looks like. So protected route example, if you can see this, click on the user icon. When we finish this, we'll see what this looks like, but here is the component. Now from here, I'm going to add in, or add back in, this guard. And if we look in the guard, that this is nothing more than a class. Surprise, welcome to Angular. And this implements a can activate interface, which has one method that we have to implement, which is can activate. Now, can activate takes in two parameters, next and state. So next is where is this going, and what is the state of the snapshot. And from here, there is a number of things that this can return. I'm not going to get into that. What we care about here is Boolean. And so I'm going to, let's start with true. And what you're going to see, hopefully, is that nothing changes. So I'm able to navigate freely to this protected route, no problem. But if I go and I set this to false, then I'll go from any other route to protected routes, and notice I'm clicking on this, but nothing is happening. It's just simply saying you cannot go to this route. And if I stopped here, this could potentially be a subpar user experience, because when you click on something, you expect that something's going to happen. And so this is where, when I mentioned that there's yet an additional option that we have, and that is when you click on a route you should not go to, you have the ability to capture and say, oh, this person's not authenticated. Let's direct them to a place to do so. So within our auth guard here, we're going to update this. And so you notice here, I'm injecting the auth service as well as the router. And so what I'm going to do is when somebody hits this protected route and then they're directed to this auth guard, I am going to stop and I'm going to check, like, is this person authenticated. And if they are, carry on. If not, what we're going to do is something else entirely. So the return for this is we're going to call this auth service and is authenticated. And this is going to return true or false. But if they're not authenticated, we can take this a step further. And this is where good UX prevails. So within this, we're going to pipe off of this and we're going to tap. And so tap is the ability to tap into an observable stream and do something that would cause a side effect. And from here, we're going to capture the value being returned from this observable stream. So we're calling this auth service is authenticated. And what we want to know is, are they authenticated? Is authenticated. And then from here, we're going to say, if they're not authenticated, then we're going to take severe and dire actions. There will be consequences. And so if they're not authenticated, we're simply going to route them to the login page. So in this case, navigate by URL, and we're just going to send them to login. All right. And if they are authenticated, we're just going to return this as to not break the stream. And so now, if they're authenticated, great. You can go on your way. If not, we're going to send them to the login page. So if we go back into our application and I click on protected routes, if you can see this, then you are currently authenticated. But if I log out, then now you are directed towards the login page. But then if I go and try to navigate to this directly, you notice here that it thought about it for a second and then it sent me right back to the login page. And so what's happening is when I click that logout button, I'm basically setting a property on the auth service to I'm not authenticated, and which then prevents me from navigating directly to it because it hits that auth guard and redirects me back to the login page. But then once I click login, then I can go back to protected routes and I'm able to do that freely and without any kind of problem whatsoever. So just to review real quickly on this example, the big thing here is within the app routing module, you simply add in a can activate property, which takes in a guard, and a guard is going to implement the can activate interface. And so from here, it has a single function that's going to return true or false, or for the sake of good UX and UI, that we can also perform some logic here to say, if this is false, maybe we want to do something for the user on their behalf. And so this is how you can protect a route in an Angular application.